C# track of Fibonacci. Thank you very much for joining us. This is the third session we've had so far. Before we start, can I just get some feedback on the last two sessions? I just want to ask for volunteers on what you think about the previous sessions. Were they clear and were you able to understand them? Was there anything that you think needs more clarification or any feedback that you'd like to share with the rest of the class? Right, so any volunteers, please? Maybe we can start with Carlos.
Sorry, I just realized my microphone is mute.
It's all right. It's all right.
Couldn't get to the second session, but I was in the first session.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as I remember, I think it was quite didactic. I like it. I think like the purpose of making small projects, like starting hands-on.
Okay.
I like that approach. Actually coding small and you telling like the questions on the go. That's really good.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Ask on the spot, then you just forget.
Okay. Okay. So
my feedback.
All right. So you like the small, very small tests that we do in the code, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Something that you can get the result.
Okay. Immediate feedback and see that it works. Yeah. Okay.
Understanding the logic of the columns and hierarchies and all that stuff that is new for people that we are not related to programming.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I would say that.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that. Was there anything that you think we could improve on?
I will tell you today, like if I see something that I can
okay.
improve, I will definitely tell you.
All right. Sure. Thank you for that. Okay. All right. Unfortunately, the others don't have microphones as well. So, Michael, you're the next first volunteer, if you may, please. Yeah.
I think I have a bit of an advantage, right? Because I've programmed before and I've done some Java. So far I'm okay. But once we get into the more difficult stuff, then it might be a bit harder.
Okay.
But you're doing a good job, Elmer.
All right. Thanks for that. Michael. Okay. All right. I think that's very helpful. Thank you very much for that, for the feedback. It's very encouraging. And just like the previous sessions and all the sessions that we've had so far, feel free to let me know if you think there's something that you can't understand and something that you want clarifications for. And yeah, I think we can go ahead with this session. So before we go any further, by the way, there are two things that I wanted to bring up. And the first one is the plan, right? So there was a question that came up are we going to issue out certificates after these sessions? Or is there anything that the participants will get out of this, in addition to learning C#? And initially I was thinking, no, I'm not sure, because these are free sessions and these are really just about sharing the C# programming language. But that was a good question after thinking about it for some time. And I just realized that, even though we are doing these sessions to share C#, there is actually something that you can get out of it if you want to, if you want to take it to the next level. And what you can really get, and this is really achievable, it's not something that you can just look up to, this is really something that you can achieve by taking part in these sessions. And that is this. Right? So I'm going to share this picture with you, not really to brag. It's a long time ago now. So this picture is from 2006, right? And in this certificate, I was able to perfect the exam from Microsoft. Right? So the passing was 700, I got 1,000, right? So didn't make a mistake. And I was able to achieve this because I studied the books, the real core book related to C#, and I did the practices, and I have this very special memorization technique that I'm going to share with you guys. Thanks, Carlos, for that. And I think this will be a good motivation for you. And my goal would be, if you want to take this exam and achieve the same result, right? So that would be an achievement for me. If I'm able to assist you to cross that finish line, if you want to, right? So this might be a good motivation for you, and we'll be in it together. So I'm going to ensure that you get there and do it, all right? If you want to, of course. And so that's one thing. And the only difference is that this exam was taken from 13 years ago, and C# has evolved since then, right? I'm not really sure if I'm planning to do the test again, because of the updated changes, because I have other things that I'd like to focus on at the moment. But I can guarantee that I will give you the assistance that you need to achieve this exam if you want. And at the moment, and I did some research, and I already bought the book myself on Kindle. So this book is available in Kindle, right? So this is the latest exam book for C#. The only thing is that before you can take this exam, and you'll be able to read it in the first part of the book, it says there that to be able to take this exam, you must have at least some experience or programming background before you go through this exam, right? And that's where the projects that we have at Neural and Fibonacci come in. You can use, to have a safe environment for testing your theory and your practices. You can use the neural projects that we'll discuss later on, maybe not in this session, to practice coding in C#, right? And let's say you can do it for 2 months, 3 months, and so on, and then we'll assist you in going through those, and we'll do the pair programming practice that we discussed previously, and then you can practice in code in GitHub, and then we'll provide assistance, and then you can start studying this book on the side, right? So this is a plan that we can execute, right? So at least now, after we've done the basic sessions for C#, which is in the homepage of this, we can start with practical exercises and actually working on code, right? So don't be afraid, don't be intimidated by the complexity of the practice of coding, because we'll be there to assist you. And at the same time, you can start studying this book, which is $15, I think, $15 or $13 on Kindle, right? So that is what we can do. So to ensure that you can start soon, you can start coding soon, even though you're still learning C#. Okay. Were there any questions? Is that plan clear? Do you think that's a viable approach that we can take? All right. Okay. So I think that's fine. Just let me know, guys, if there are any questions regarding this plan that we're going to execute. And if you're interested, cool. Okay. It would be a challenge, but sounds interesting. All right. Yeah. Thanks, Carlos. I think I'm really hoping that we can make it easy for you. If anyone who wants to learn in C# and get a certification in C#, then we'll do our best to ensure that it becomes easy for you. And okay, so in addition to that plan, I've been thinking of this Hack Nights sessions, right? Because I asked a number of the previous participants in the sessions, and my concern was that doing it on a weekly basis might take a lot of time. So by the time that you reach an advanced topic, you would have forgotten the previous topics, right? So that is and I received positive feedback on that concern, and normally you would have a frequent learning interval, so at least you get regular inputs, and ideally you should be able to practice that. So you would involve muscle memory somehow. It's not just theory. You're able to really do it and work on the code. So that's why I'm thinking that perhaps we can have, maybe we can start with once a week. In addition to these weekend sessions, we can have like a midweek hack night, right? So what will happen is we'll do a poll to determine which night is the best, but maybe it's a late hack night, right? So we can do it like every Wednesday or every Friday. So after 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. So we'll determine the best time. But basically, it's around 1 or 2 hours. It's up to you. It's not like a session like this wherein there's a strict time that we're supposed to follow. What we're going to do is we're going to have group study sessions, and then we'll code together. Maybe we can do pair programming, and I'll assist you. So it's up to you if you would like to come over to the location. So normally I'm at Starbucks, in one of the Starbucks on Swanston Street, or you can join us online, right? And we'll just code together and learn together, and maybe we'll have like a sprint session, like let's say 30-minute, 40-minute session, continuous coding or study or research. Then every 10 minutes in an hour, we'll collaborate. We'll just check up on each other. How are you doing? Is there anything that you need help on? Do you have any questions? Do you need assistance? And so on. So we can do like 2 hours for that late hack night, right? So let's say from 8 to 10, and that's it. But at least the important thing is that you can start experiencing the collaboration process wherein we help each other as a team in developing and learning code, And I think that would be beneficial because we have, for example, another developer who's working on the React.js side of Dash, which is the browser for Neural. And we've been meeting up like since 2 weeks ago, in the mornings. But the difficulty with that is some of you guys would be available only at night. So we'll see. We'll determine the best approach. But the thing is that the important thing is that those who would like to go faster in their studies on C# will be able to, and then we'll just be assisting each other during those weekdays, right? And we can use these weekend sessions to catch up, right? To ensure that everyone is going on the same baseline. So those who don't want to do the weekday thing, can do it slowly, like every weekend only. And those who want to go faster and even start coding, you can join the weekday sessions, and then we can roll. All right. Okay. So looks like Carlos likes that. Thanks for that. And just let me know if you have any other suggestions. The important thing is for us, to be able to help each other grow in our community. Okay. All right. Any questions regarding what we've discussed so far? Everything clear? Okay. Right. So let's start with the lessons proper. Right. So in the previous sessions, we discussed the hello world, especially in session 1. We looked at the variables and types. And in the second session, we looked at operators and we looked at, what's the second session? Right, we looked at conditionals and arrays, which are very fundamental. So this is really a good step-by-step outline of how you should proceed C#. And hopefully that was clear to you guys. And as I said earlier, feel free to let me know if you want any more clarifications. Now, today, we're going to look at the concept of lists, right? And it came up in the previous session. We encountered one of the questions from one of the participants wherein it was asked, why don't we use multidimensional arrays, right? And why don't we normally use that? No, in my case, in my experience, I've never used it. And it's not that it's useless. I'm sure someone, some developer out there has found very useful purpose for that data structure. But the thing is, one of the main response that I gave to that question was that there were better structures that could be used instead of the multidimensional array, right? And that is, well, one of them is the list. So lists are just basic structures for containing data, right? So you can have a list for strings, you can have a list for integers, and so on. Actually, any data type, right? Especially if you're using a generic list, like in the example being used here, right? So in this case, right, we're just going to discuss this constructor that's being used here, right? Now, in this line here, what's happening is, as I said, okay, so let's go back to the way of thinking of how, of languages. This line here is really just a sentence or a statement which is declaring a variable whose type is list of integer values, right? So this is where you declare your type. So this is list. And this is, I don't know why they skipped it, but this is a special combination, which is called a declaration of a generic type, right? So when you say list and you pass in int, right? So that is basically, you're just saying the type that is being used here is int. So you can have a different type of generic type, which is string, for example, to say that you're creating a list of strings. And then after you've declared the identifier for your variable, you then say new list. So you have a constructor of that item, right? So this is different from a data type, from a value type. So in the previous sessions, we discussed value types, right? So integer, string, double, float, those types are actually called value types. So we're not going to go into detail about the difference between value types and reference types for now, but because I think there's a better way of explaining it, and we just don't have time for that. But just to keep it simple for now, just remember that list is not a value type. It's not like the types that we have before. It's actually a class, right? It's a reference type, right? And you can Google that if you like, if you need immediate background. But this is a class, right? So that's why in the previous session, when we created integer, you didn't need the new keyword, right? So it's like saying in this variable, you actually want to have an instance created, right? So you're creating a new type, a new instance of this type, and assigning it to numbers. So if you remember, let me just open .NET Fiddle to make it simple. It's just difficult, this mouse pad. Just give me a second here. So .NET Fiddle. So in the previous session, let's create a new one. Remember, we were creating variables, right? Like, let's say var, integer I is equal to 5, right? Now, this time, remember when we were doing this, we didn't really need new, right? We're just assigning the value directly. Now, this time, what we're doing is we are creating an instance of a class before we assign it, right? So this is using system generic. I'm just going to fix that. The collections dot generic, right? Because this list is using generic namespace. This is using the generic library, right? So what's going on here is we're creating a declaration of a variable of list of numbers and creating that instance of that list and assigning it here. Okay. Right. So now that we've instantiated that list, right? So there's already, so you can imagine it like, remember in the first session we were saying it's like a magic, it's like a magical activity, right? So what's happening is you can imagine that you're creating out of nowhere this object called a list of numbers. So it's there in memory. It's just instantiated there. It's not visible to you, but it's there. And then once it's there, once it's floating invisibly behind you, what you can then do is you can start interacting with that object in memory. So you can say add 3, and then you can say add, okay, it's very strict. What's the problem with this one? Okay, so you can say add 4, and then you can say numbers that add 5, and so on. So it's like your array that we discussed in the last session, but as you can see, it's much simpler to work with, right? You don't need to specify a specific dimension, like, or a length to the array, so you can specify any length, and you can just add to it, So, just like in the last session, you have the instance, you have the method, which is add, and then you just pass in the parameter. So this combination is just talking about setting a value or adding a value to your list. And it's very simple. It's much simpler to work with. And then to access the values, okay, let's just go through the, right. So, and then in addition to adding values to it, you can even pass an array, right? So let's say you've already created an array and you want to pass that array as a value to that list. You can just use add range, and it will add the items directly into that list. Yeah. Immutable. Yes. Immutable, do you mean in a sense that they cannot be changed?
In the sense, so it's easy. I didn't want to interrupt. In the sense that, so the problem with arrays, if I remember right, is like you said, you have to be able to predict how many spaces you need in an array, because you need to declare the size of the array when you create the array. Whereas a list is an object, and it will grow or shrink.
Yes.
Add or remove as you add or remove values to it.
Exactly.
Which is, now I remember why, like you said, pretty much nobody uses an array anymore, because they're just so fixed in what you can do. You either create them too big or you're going to create them too small.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Just double checking.
Yes, that is actually correct. And if you think about it, it's like, arrays have been around for a very long time. And when we and I think we touched on it very briefly in the last session as well, these structures are very basic, and they were there from the beginning. And then later on, we started having lists. We started having generic lists, and we started having more complex but more powerful objects that you can use readily. So someone else has actually coded those stuff for you, and that makes it easier for us to use them. Yeah. And going back to your point there, Michael, it is actually possible to modify an array, but not really modify it. You can concatenate to it using this special method, but that instance of an array is fixed. So it's very difficult to work with. You need other objects to be able to play with it.
It's messy, right?
It gets messy. That's the perfect term for it. But for if you use lists, if you use dictionaries, everything is managed for you. You don't even have to think of certain complex stuff. Yeah. So cool. So it's like working with, you know, the manual drill that you use like this, and there's another type of drill which is just by the press of a button it will just rotate continuously. So that might be an analogy you can think of it.
Yep.
Cool. All right. Okay. Right. So to add to an array, you call this to the list. You may pass in an array, and to remove from an array, it's just a matter of calling the remove method. So if we say here numbers.remove, remove at will remove a certain index. So let's say remove 2 as 1, because we want to remove, let's say, 4, right? Added 4. Let's change the numbers. Let's make it come bigger so we can differentiate it clearly. We're adding another number, 1, 2, 3, and this 9, 8, 4. So if we call this method here, this will be removed. So if we call numbers, do this, I'm not really sure, like an array. Okay, that items. Okay, I can't remember. How do you call it? Remove at 1. I think you should be able to call it like this. Normally in C#, it gives you feedback automatically if you don't get it. So numbers 1 is, let's say, integer x, and then we say console.writeLine. That writeLine, writeLine, and then x. Then this should say 984 because we've already removed this item. So let's just run that and see. 984, right? So because this has removed this item here. Now, if you remove the first item, let's say 0, then the first item will show 1, 2, 3. If you run that, it should be 1, 2, 3. Okay. So was that clear? Is it clear to everyone what the concept of a list is, basically? So it's just a list, and you can create a list of strings. You can, you know, in this example, we just created a list of integers, but there are a lot of cases wherein you will create lists of other types, right? So you can have a list of persons, you can have a list of strings, you can have a list of anything, really, that you have in C#. Okay, so any questions? Okay, cool. That's all right. Carlos, yeah, feel free to ask. No worries, no worries. Do you have any questions? Okay, cool. All right. So we now know how to create lists, add to them, remove to them, and access the values. There's a special thing about lists, and that is the count, right? So let's say we don't remove items from that list, and we just want to count the number of items in a list. All you need to do that is just say numbers.count. So if you remember in the one of the previous sessions, we talked about properties in addition to methods. Now, properties is like the attributes, the information attributes about your instance, and count is one of them. Right? So when you call count, it will just tell you the number of items you have in the list. So let's say it's like the length in the array that we had previously. All right. You can then concatenate lists. So you can say you have this list which is food, okay, and then you can add values to that list, and then you can have another string list which is vegetables, tomato, and carrot. And then what you can do is you can just combine them together. So you have two containers in memory. You have one container containing fruits, you have another container containing vegetables. And when you call food.addRange, you will basically just combine those together, right? You'll, as you can see here, what's happening is it's adding the contents of this list into this list here, so that when you call food.count, it will actually show us 4 instead of just 2, because we already have the combination of those items together. All right, so let's try it again. Let's see if that is the case for this example. So if you run it, 4, right? Because we have 4 items instead of just 2. Right, so that's list. Now, I'll just leave this as an assignment for you guys, right? And I would use the first hack night as an opportunity to check your assignments. So I'd encourage you to join the hack night. I'll just leave a poll either tonight or tomorrow, and then we'll determine the first hack night that we can have. And then in that hack night, we'll discuss the assignments. So you could start doing the assignments, the previous exercises. And then, you know, if you need any assistance, just let me know so we can flesh it out. You know, we can clarify if there's anything not clear in the coding topics that we've covered so far. Okay. Right. So just we're running out of time. So let's just go through one more topic before we close tonight's session. All right. Okay. So the next topic is dictionary, right? So this is what we were mentioning last time. This is another structure which is used for mapping a key to a value, right? So a dictionary can have 2 types which can be stored, which can be used as a key value pair, right? So one type is the type of the key, and the other type is the type of the value. So an everyday example would be string key and then a student, right? So, you know, in universities, in school, what we would do is we would have a student number. I don't know if, I'm sure that that's how they would manage information as well today. Just correct me if I'm wrong. But there would be a student ID, and to that student ID, that would map to an entity of a student, right? Because that student ID would represent the reference for all the information related to a specific student. And if you're going to simplify how that information will be stored, what you would do is you would, at a basic level, just use a dictionary, wherein the first type is the student number or student ID, which is a string, and the other type would be just a student object, which is just your student information, the fields in that student object model, and you have the different fields related to that student. So you can have like address, you can have age, you can have course, and so on, right? So managing that key value structure would be easy with the use of a dictionary, right? So a dictionary is like a mapping between, as I said, a mapping between a key and a value. So in the example used in Learn CS, they're actually using a phone book. So they're mapping the value, the name as a string key, and they're mapping the phone number as a value, right? So it's like if you just look up the definition as a dictionary, it's just a basic dictionary. It's just a mapping between this key and the value for that key, right? So just like the list, you create an object. You first define the type of your variable. So these are the generic parameters, right? you pass in the type of the key, and then you pass in the type of the value. So if you were to code this, you would immediately see, you know, if you're using Visual Studio IDE or Visual Studio Code, it will show you some hints on how you work with it. So not sure if it's going to show here. Okay, it's not showing, but I can use Visual Studio itself to show you how it's working. So if just use this code, and let's say, yep. Okay, so let's just use this as an example. Okay, startup. So in code, if you do it in code, it will give you some hints, right? So if you say dictionary, and you just call that, okay. So here, just by typing the open, the less than sign, then it will show you the type of the key. So represents, so T key is the type of the keys in the dictionary. So let's say string, and then it's showing another hint, which is the type of the value. So you pass in the value. So in this case, long, right? Because you want to map phone numbers, which is long, to the name, which is a string, right? And you will create a dictionary for this. So this is phone numbers, and then you create a new instance. Again, this is the identifier. So this is like a leash. You could think of this as a leash to your object. So remember in the previous example, we created a list of integers. It's like a magical activity. So you create something out of nothing, which is the list of numbers, and this name is like your rope to that instance, so it doesn't float away. You know, it doesn't just vanish in thin air. So this is your identifier. This is what you use to reference to that instance, and you create an instance actually here. Right, so by doing this, you create a new instance of phone numbers. Okay, so where's that? Yeah. So we create, it's very simple, just like the lists. And then you can just add to it. And to add to it, you just pass first. So it accepts two parameters when you add to it. The first parameter is the key. So let's say Alex, that's the key that you want. And then this is the value that you want to be mapped to the key of Alex. So when you call this, so let's say, okay, let's copy that to make it faster. Right. So this is an integer. Sorry. Yep. Takes a while for it to think and realize it's okay. Then let's say we add to this phone numbers that add, say Elmer. This is the key. And let's say we have a value for it. Let's say my phone number is 042 123 456. And that is a long value, so it doesn't need double quotes. And that's it. Now to get that value, all you need to do is say phone numbers, just pass in the key. So Elmer. So you assign this to your long X. So we're creating a variable which will catch, or where the value of this dictionary will be assigned to. And when you say console.writeLine, then you can say long X. And if you run this, it should show the phone number. Right, so you can have any number of values that you want to be used in this dictionary. And this is very fundamental because it's very useful, and as well as the last topic, which is lists. And you'll use this so many times, you won't even know that you're using them. That's how important these structures are. Okay. Like we said earlier, feel free to go through these topics on your own. And if you have any questions, then let's just go through them in the succeeding sessions. All right? Right, so the removal is the same. You just pass in the key, and that will remove the value from there. All right, so again, for this one, feel free to do it on your own. So feel free to use .NET Fiddle. So this is a very good web application where you can, copy the code here or do the exercise in these sessions, in these topics. Okay. So yeah, I think that's it. That's it for today. I hope that wasn't too fast. Let me know if we did, if we went through it too fast. And yeah, so do you have any questions about these two topics? Michael, I think you're saying something. You're mute. Your microphone is muted. Oh, cool. Okay. All right. So anyone else? I have too many, but it's not for this session. Okay. All right. No worries. No worries. So maybe in the hack night. So we'll just agree on the best schedule for the hack nights. Might be Friday or Wednesday, whichever is most convenient for you guys. So at least we can start coding. We can start playing with C#, and then we can start installing in your machines. Right. Okay. Thanks for that, Rose. Yeah. Okay. So that's it. That's it for tonight's session. Thank you very much for joining us. And please feel free to hit like and subscribe in our YouTube channel. And see you in the next session, or possibly in the hack night.